Hello, my name is Christina Wiegand and I am South Atlantic Council staff. I'll be presenting an overview of Snapper Grouper Amendment 42, which addresses modifications to sea turtle release gear requirements. First, let's go over where we are in the amendment process. We are currently at the scoping stage, and scoping is the first stage of the process to amend a fishery management plan after an issue has been identified. And it really serves two main purposes. First, to inform you that the councils may propose new regulations or change existing ones, as well as to allow you the opportunity to comment on the issue or identify any other issues that may need the attention of the council. And the council will review these scoping comments as they begin to develop management actions and alternatives. And once a draft document has been put together, that document will again go out to public hearings to provide another opportunity for comment on the management actions and alternatives. And then the council will review those comments as well before taking any final action on the document. But scoping is the first and best opportunity to make suggestions to the council before an amendment is developed. So why are sea turtle release gears required for the Snapper Grouper fishery, and why is the council considering modifying them? Well, the Snapper Grouper fishery is known to interact with endangered and threatened sea turtles as well as endangered smalltooth sawfish. And there can be adverse effects to these species as a result from being hooked on or entangled in gear that's used to target Snapper Grouper species. And the Endangered Species Act requires that any federal agency proposing an action that could have an effect on ESA-listed species consult with the National Marine Fisheries Service. And so in June 2006, the National Marine Fisheries Service Southeast Regional Office completed a biological opinion for the Snapper Grouper fishery. And that opinion concluded that the fishery's continued authorization would not jeopardize the continued existence of those listed sea turtles and smalltooth sawfish. However, in the terms and conditions was a measure to implement sea turtle handling protocol or guidelines for the commercial and for-hire sectors of the Snapper Grouper fishery. And those were first implemented in Snapper Grouper Amendment 15B. And then Comprehensive Ecosystem-Based Amendment 2 modified those release gear requirements to allow smaller vessels to have fewer gear requirements based on the freeboard height of the vessel. Now, fishermen are required to possess and use sea turtle handling and release gear that is consistent with the National Marine Fisheries Service's careful release protocols for sea turtle release with minimal injury. And those release protocols were originally published in 2004 with revised editions released in 2008 and 2010. And a new update is now ready for publication, and in that update there are 3 additional sea turtle release gears that have been approved by the Southeast Fisheries Science Center for use. And these new gears require less space on the vessel while still providing the necessary function. However, these gear cannot be used as an option by Snapper Grouper fishermen until they are implemented for use in the regulations. And it's important to note that these new gear types are only additional options and by no means are the only gear that industry may use to satisfy the regulatory requirements. The first of the recently approved gear types for use in handling and releasing incidentally caught sea turtles is the collapsible hoop net. And the collapsible hoop net is used for bringing an incidentally captured turtle on board the fishing vessel in order to remove the hook and filament line. The collapsible hoop must be capable of lifting 100 pounds with a minimum diameter of 31 inches and a minimum bag depth of 38 inches. The second recently approved gear type is the small sea turtle hoist, and again this is used for bringing an incidentally captured sea turtle on board the fishing vessel in order to remove the hook and monofilament line, and typically it's recommended to be used for sea turtles that cannot be boated using a traditional dip net. It's also commonly used on fishing vessels that have a high freeboard or vessels that have limited space. And again, it must be capable of lifting 100 pounds with a minimum diameter of 31 inches, however it has no minimum bag depth. Finally, the short-handled dehooker is another option recently approved to remove external hooks from sea turtles. And it's important to note that dehookers that have been approved for external hooks are also allowed to remove hooks that have been embedded internally right inside the turtle's mouth, but not hooks that have been ingested within the esophagus or beyond the gastrointestinal tract. So, this newly approved dehooker does not meet the requirements of a short-handled dehooker for internal hooks. Now, this dehooker is recommended to be used when removing small, lightly externally embedded hooks, and is recommended if the fishing hook cannot be removed via needle nose pliers or bolt cutters. Currently, there are 2 actions being considered for inclusion in Amendment 42. The first looks at modifying the regulations for vessels with commercial or charter headboat permits for snapper grouper to allow the use of the 3 new sea turtle release gear types. And the Council feels that since these 3 new gear types are only additional options and are not the only gear the industry may use to satisfy regulatory requirements, that adding this gear to the regulations only results in positive impacts both for fishermen and protected resources, since more flexibility is afforded to fishermen and it would allow them to use more compact sea turtle release gear. In addition, there's a second action that looks at modifying the Snapper Grouper framework procedure to include changes to release gear requirements and handling protocols for sea turtles and other protected resources through the abbreviated framework process. Now, the Council has a number of different regulatory mechanisms for addressing fisheries management issues. They can amend the Fisheries Management Plan to establish new or modify existing management measures, and this process can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. In addition to that, they can also prepare a framework action that's based on a predetermined procedure that allows changes to specific management measures and parameters. And this can take less than a year to implement. There's also an abbreviated procedure which can take less than 3 months to implement. Currently, changes to release gear and handling requirements for sea turtles and other protected species are required to go through the full plan amendment process. And the Council feels that these actions would streamline management and provide flexibility to participants in the commercial and for-hire components of the snapper grouper fishery, but as always, they are interested in hearing from you on whether these issues should be addressed in Amendment 42 and whether there are any other issues that should be considered for inclusion in this amendment. Here we have the tentative timeline for this amendment. Right now, we are currently undergoing scoping hearings. In June, the Council will review those comments and approve the actions and alternatives to be analyzed. They'll review a draft document in September 2018 and consider approving that for public hearings, which could tentatively occur in November. After that, they would review those public comments and make any changes to the document that they deemed necessary, and we'd be looking at final action tentatively in March 2019. There are a number of different ways to provide comment on this amendment. First, we are going to be having scoping webinars April 23rd and 24th, both starting at 6 p.m. Registration is required for those webinars, and you can register at the links below. And those webinars will include a presentation about the amendment as well as a question and answer session followed by an opportunity to provide your comments on the record. If you're unable to attend those scoping webinars, you can also submit written comments, and you can do that via our online public comment form, and the link is provided there. Just keep in mind that the deadline for comments to be included in the comment overview for the June 2018 meeting is going to be May 18th at 5 p.m. If you want to connect with the South Atlantic Council and stay informed about this amendment or any other management actions that are working their way through the Council, you can check us out online. We have our webpage as well as links to our Facebook and Twitter provided. If there is something that we didn't cover at this presentation, you are more than welcome to reach out to me with questions about sea turtle release gear. If you have general questions about the South Atlantic Council, please don't hesitate to contact Cameron Rhodes, our Fishery Outreach Specialist, or Kim Iverson, our Public Information Officer.